lived, but never seen.
Let us strive every moment of our lives to make ourselves better and better to the best of our ability.
Sometimes masquerading as the spider, thus concealing his identity from both criminals and the police.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows. The shadow knows.
Artist and illustrator Douglas Klauba has depicted many of the great heroes of the 20th century, including a host of pulp magazine titans. An admirer of the work of pulp artists Walter Baumhofer, Virgil Finlay, Hubert Rogers, George Rosen, Mr. Klauba declares himself a fan of the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard as well, and is a pulp enthusiast. Chicago native, graduated from the American Academy of Art in Chicago in 1985. He also studied at the Academy of Art College in San Francisco. His illustrations have been commissioned for posters, advertising, book covers, magazines, corporate communications, calendars, collector's plates, and you'll see some of those, and by various national and international agencies and design firms, and now Apple TV as well. Doug, you grew up in a family with actual artists and creators. Can you recall the first artist who probably wasn't a family member who really made, or maybe it was, who really engaged you and you realized, okay, this is the artist and this is their stuff? And
well, that's a great question. My uncle George is a fine artist, and he was probably my first true inspiration because there was somebody in my family who was an artist. But it all comes down to Frazetta for me. I mean, Frazetta was the very first artist that I really saw as a young developing artist. You know, this guy's stuff was dynamic to me. It was amazing. I mean, it was everything that was going on in my mind as a fantasy reader or reading comic books or something heroic. So it always comes back to Frazetta. Even to this day, you know, Frazetta work is still right up there in the number one spot for me.
So we had some horror images playing, so the timing worked out kind of well. A lot of us of our vintage who grew up to become writers or artists were influenced by comic books. And I heard on a recent podcast interview you gave, you weren't really a superhero guy as a kid. You were more of a horror
I was a horror kid.
Yeah, so how has that stayed with you, and what would you like to do in that genre?
It still has stayed with me. I like the classic horror films or classic Universal monster films more than anything. But I found my way with comic books through Classics Illustrated. I mean, I used to read Treasure Island and Three Musketeers and Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then there's Frankenstein and Dracula, and that's where I saw the comic books where it would clue in with my interest. And it wasn't until I started running out of Warren magazines to read on a weekly basis or a monthly basis of picking up Eerie, Creepy, Vampirella, or Famous Masters of Filmland, or finding another Classics Illustrated that I can read. That's when I started looking at the spinner rack and saying, oh, Batman has this man bat on it, or Spider-Man's fighting the Molten Man. What's this Molten Man? I was more interested in seeing what kind of monsters were going on. And I started collecting comics through monster comic books, but eventually I ended up going into reading superhero comic books.
And then you made the obvious and logical transition to commercial art. How has that influenced you? What did you glean from that was useful to you in your present efforts?
Well, when I went to art school, I went to art school to be a comic book artist, but maybe more of a comic book artist or illustrator like Frazetta, or another one of my favorite artists were Jim Steranko, who was doing both comics and illustrated paperback covers. and also pulp stuff. But anyway, when I got to art school and I got involved in the program that I was studying, the financial aid woman asked me, which program are you in? Are you going to be in the fine art program, or are you going to be in the illustration program? And I said, well, what's the difference? Even though I knew what the difference was, I go, but what was the difference in the program? And she said, well, at fine art, you'll be creating artwork for yourself, and then with illustration, you'll be creating it for somebody else to make money. And I said, I'll go with the money. And
we do it for the art, but we're not above the money.
So yeah, I already did it for the art. So now I had to put the money into the situation. So when I got out of art school, I had a portfolio, and at that time, you can get a job at an art studio or an illustration studio. And I was fortunate enough to work in Chicago commercially in an illustration studio that serviced advertising agencies or different corporations like Quaker Oats or Sunkist, John Deere, things like that around the Chicago area.
We had someone come up to our table about an hour or two ago and started, an illustrator, and started asking you questions about your mediums and that sort of thing. And you've said that as a young art student, you experimented with everything.
Yeah.
So what do you use now? Everything's so vivid, it really pops. What do you use and why?
I use acrylic paints. It's something that I started using in the studio. I used it in art school and played around with it, but I was probably more of a water medium artist, so I used watercolor or designer gouache. But the acrylics seem to kind of fit my way of working, where I put something down and I keep moving along. And also when I put it down, I didn't want to mess it up. So like with oil paints, I might mess it up a little bit, at least back then. So I ended up being told in the studio to use an airbrush. I needed to learn how to use an airbrush. And gouache or watercolor didn't work as well in the airbrush as acrylic paint did. And then I found out commercially artists that I admired, like Drew Struzan and Thomas Blackshear, they used acrylics in their airbrush work. So that's when I thought that would probably be the best thing for me to do, is follow along with the artists that I liked and how they worked. And this way, when I got to ask them questions about the medium or technique or just style, I was already working in that medium. So yeah, acrylic paints, no special wand, just the local brand you could buy at Michael's or Hobby Lobby.
Wow.
Yeah, Liquitex.
Okay. So recently somebody published a book of reference photos that James Bama took for the Doc Savage Bantam paperback series, and it's kind of interesting looking at those where they're black and white, they're very dramatically lit, and the photo 9 times out of 10 is almost exactly what the finished painting, absent the widow's peak. I've seen some of your reference photos. Can you talk a little bit about it? They seem to be in color, most of them.
Only
did you
because
study
that's the way the
photography?
Photo Lab would have.
Well, that's what I'm wondering now.
It's always cheaper for them to just print them out in color as they would in black and white. But it really doesn't really matter too much working from a black and white photo or a color photo, except that with working in a color photo, it's as if you're looking at a live model in front of you that you would draw or paint as an art school. You would see the way the way the light is hitting the colors and affecting the shadows and stuff like that. And a color photography would kind of remind me then of also when I would have been painting or drawing a model or live model in art school or in a studio. It would remind me this is the way the light would work, or the way the shadows would be cast on the figure.
Right.
So yeah, that's the reason why.
With Bama's photos and the covers, you sort of feel like he never moves. It's sort of statuary. And we've talked a lot about
that, yeah.
Motion and implied kinetic action. So I get the sense too that when you do reference photos, there's not a photo like that you pick the best expression, the best hand maybe? Is that fair?
I mean, I wish I can get that one shot, that I would paint, but it's never that way, which is why if I have a model in the studio and I'm photographing them, I will continuously take photos of them in that pose and tell them to keep moving or move your hand. Because eventually when I started looking at my photo references, that I like the face on the one photo, but I like the hands in the other, or I like the way the body's on one shot, or I like the folds in the trench coat in another. It's stuff like that. So it gives me a lot more information to choose from instead of just being dictated by one photograph.
Right.
And then of course there's a lot of drawing that would come about with that as well. But somebody also did ask me at the table too, do you still use models? And I still do use models, but there's other ways of getting my references together. I've been relying more on drawing with using photos to make my drawings better, whereas in the beginning I always just take the photo and work from the photo from the beginning process to the end. So there's photo packs online that you can buy of models, both male and female, and some of them are in action poses, some of them are just in posed sitting poses. So it's stuff like that. I'll just buy stuff and just keep it on the desktop in a folder, and when I'm looking for something, I'll just go through my reference photos to see what I can use.
Right.
And then like specifically like with some of yours, I would go to some past photos that I already had taken of a model, and I'd find the pose or similar poses and put all that together when I start working on yours.
Right.
So, and wins as well, actually, in the recent one.
Yeah, you have three covers debuting here, I think. Yeah, including this one. And wins.
Yeah, and then one from Burroughs.
Burroughs, yeah. So I've seen your work described as heroic Deco, or you as a contemporary pulp artist. I think creators have the successful creators have a really strong sense of what makes them them. What makes you, Doug?
I think not knowing where to go makes me me.
Really? You want to elaborate?
No, I only because I have a varied interest, but I think it really has to do with my interest has always been pulp art, even at an early age, reading comic books, or again looking at the old issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland, or the Monster Times in the back, or even Steranko's media scene. There was always articles on pulp magazines and the pulp heroes. So, as much as people have said, I'm a heroic Deco artist, I've always had reactions from other friends or other people saying, I really like the way you do like the golden age hero when you do a hero. And I'm like, I had no idea I was doing a golden age version of a hero. So I guess it's that outlook on what I'm doing. I look at what inspires me, and it's definitely the golden age illustrators that a lot of us know in the room. J. Allen St. John, and then of course Roy Krankel, stuff like that. And I like, as much as I would love to be in that category, and I know I'm not, those are the guys that, if you look on a family tree and who they inspired, I would be on that tree of a connection to the work that they did. And that's where I kind of see my work. I look at it as pulp artists living today and doing the artwork that they enjoy doing, and either it's heroic, or it's got a horror bent to it, or more of a crime scene that's depicted.
Perfect transition. So almost contemporaneous, or very contemporaneous, with the rise of pulp magazines in the era that we all know them and love them, you had hard-boiled crime and film noir emerge as well. So a lot of the images that have been showing and will show and should loop have been very hard-boiled. Private Eye, you've done Marlo, you've done classic Venetian blind lit rooms and that sort of thing. So you just did the Sugar project for Apple TV, where you're doing these posters for imaginary films. How did that come about?
My friend Mark Protasevich is the film runner, or the story show runner on that. He created the show, he wrote it, and put together the production on it. And basically, because we grew up together, we've known each other since early teens. We have the same kind of background in our interests. We went to our Comic-Cons together. We both love pulp. He introduced me to my favorite novel, Princess of Mars. He's the one who said, "You got to read this." And we went and saw movies together. So we know what movies that I know what movies that he likes. And I think when it got to a point where he was putting this project together, he's like, "Where can I put my friends on this project?" Because he likes to work with people.
Oh, here we go. Perfect timing. Don't take videos or pictures.
He likes to work with people that he enjoys going every day to the office and saying, "I had a great day working with my friends." And it's part of that collaboration process. So he said, "I think I got something that you might be interested in. I know I would love to have you on board, but for the show. So I'm going to put you in touch with the production designer." And the production designer was Tom Foden, who blew me away because he was the production designer on the movie The Cell, which was really highly visual and stylistic. And Mark said, "If Tom says yes to you, then you can work on the on the project." And Tom looked at my portfolio and he said, "Yeah, definitely. I'd love to have you work on this." So Mark and I went over some ideas, what he was looking for these imaginary titles. And the reason why we're saying imaginary titles here is because in the show, Colin Farrell, I want to say Colin Firth, I do that all the time. Colin Farrell is talking to a movie producer, and he's naming off his movies. So he wanted that universe in this show as if it really was happening. So he wanted to make sure that a movie that he talked about would be somewhere in a scene. So if people recalled the conversation in the show and they would see the movie poster, they'd say, "Oh, that was that movie that they were talking about." Much like we do when we say, "Oh, did you see this movie?" And then you see the movie poster. I had to do these in three. I had to do eight designs.
Very quick.
Yeah, eight designs in 3 weeks. And I lost a week only because they tried calling me before the 4th of July. And actually, they didn't try calling me. They were emailing me, but the email wasn't going anywhere because my web server was down, and anything that was on Doug@douglasklauba.com wasn't coming to me. So when Mark called and said, "Hey, they're trying to get hold of you and you're not responding," I said, "Can you please have them use Gmail? And then I can respond." And sure enough, like 5 minutes later, I was able to get an email and got the whole scope of the project. Did a major gulp when he said it's due August 1st. And it was July 5th when I finally talked to them. And I still haven't been approved yet. So I knew that I still had to talk to the production designer. So everything happened pretty quickly. So by midweek that week, everything was good. I got the list of movies, and then Mark and I talked, and then I started sketching, and I literally painted each of those within 1 to 2 days apiece. So, and it was quick.
Amazing.
And but they had to have it ready to go for their beginning filming August 1st of 2 years ago.
What becomes of that work beyond the film? Do you release it at some point potentially, or where does it reside?
Well, right now those paintings reside in a flat file at home.
Okay.
I'm not supposed to share the images on social media, although scenes from the show I've shared, like this is a scene and that's my poster on, or look at that wonderful poster over there, and then I'm hoping that I can talk to the production people and see if they would be able to release an agreement where I can actually do something, not to sell, but to put in a book or just include in promotion of what I do.
Have they talked to you about a second season? Or are they going to be okay? I was just seeing if they were going to give you a humane period of time.
Well, yeah. Well, the nice thing about that show was Colin Farrell's character was a film buff, and he was really obsessed with film and film history. So there might be a chance if there is a season 2 that they would need more posters for the production. But at this point, I don't know if there's a second season. Although I would say that now I worked on those posters before AI kind of exploded, or people started creating AI art, and I really do feel that if that had exploded a little earlier, I don't think I would have been doing that, because it would have been easier for them just to type up something and have AI design a poster within minutes or a day. I don't know how long it takes for AI to work it all.
Looks like 5 seconds.
Yeah, it looks like 5 seconds, and we did talk about that as well.
Yeah. I had an AI questions, as you know, at the end, but that would be a dark ending, so I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, we'll go there now.
Yeah, okay. What do you think about it? I mean, what's it do to your industry?
My industry, it's awful. It demeans art. It lessens its value. It makes artists feel like you don't produce anything of interest or special because anybody can do it, and it's not the case. All AR, and I talked to this earlier with another guy at the table too. AI art has become a point where we're starting to realize what synthetic art looks like. We're starting to say, wait a minute, that looks like it's AI art. And it's sad because and that's the reason why. What's sad is there was no heart and soul put in that. It was just all solving a problem. And commercial art can be just solving a problem. So there are maybe some advantages, but I did hear a great line from somebody who said, why can't AI art do something important for artists? Like maybe figure out, maybe they can do the dishes for me or run errands for me so I could spend more time doing my artwork. That would be a better cause for AI for any of us. And somebody also told me, when they started saying the movie executives were saying we can get rid of a lot of these creative people by just using AI art,
including actors,
and actors as well. And somebody posted a question to AI: what would be the logical step in creating films? And the AI program said, well, we definitely don't need executives. So it's kind of a nutshell where
even the devil's right sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
So this weekend we're gathered to celebrate pulps and pulp history. You said as a child or a teen you collaborated on Doc Savage fans. Does any of that still exist?
Oh, I wish. And I did that with my friend Mark, who did Sugar. We did a Doc Savage fan magazine. We ran it off a mimeograph machine in his mom's basement, or his basement. It was his mom's mimeograph machine. And that was one of the first things Mark asked me after we reconnected after years of not having social media.
Yeah.
He's like, you wouldn't happen to still have those fanzines we did in the basement? And I don't. I really wish I did, because it was, more than anything, it was a lot of fun doing that. And but just to look at that again would be pretty scary, probably.
What is it about pulp that really reaches you? And because you've done virtually every key pulp character in some form or another at this point.
I don't know, but what it is about pulp. Well, for one, it still connects to what I always liked as a young reader, and that's the books. I was always a reader at a young age. It was a book more than a comic book, more than a movie. So that connection with pulp was there because it was words with some pictures. The artwork alone, I think, creates some of the more dynamic and stylistic artwork, and I think we're starting to see the importance of it based on auction records, even.
Right.
Yeah. And of course we all know that the formation of what we see in today's Marvel Universe or DC Universe. It all began with, Pulp, with Doc Savage and The Shadow. And probably more important was Edgar Rice Burroughs, with the creation of his universe, and how Stan Lee and some of those other creators just understood that we can create a whole universe within a little, part of our creation, and just base all of our heroes around that. I mean, George Lucas did the same thing with Star Wars. I mean, it's all pulp. Just like I say, it always comes back to me as for my favorite artist is Frazetta. I mean, it always goes back to it's pulp. I mean, it started with pulp. We're still here. It's not ending.
Yes.
Because guys like you and a lot of the other publishers and writers here, we still want to see and read that sort of character and that kind of story.
You've done Doc Savage Bantam style in the sense of the Widow's Peak at least, and then the classic Doc Savage Baumhofer style. You've done Doc Caliban. How do you approach? They're really the same character, in a sense. I mean, and you've done Tarzan and Tarzan adjacent Grandis, and yeah.
Speaking as far as Doc Savage goes, and you probably would have seen it the way on Ron's documentary earlier, was the fact that those covers in the 70s and the way they presented Doc Savage with the Widow's Peak, that was the genius way of presenting a character, because the Baumhofer way probably wouldn't have worked out for them, and we wouldn't have Doc Savage to carry on even further where he is now. You made it a little bit more science fiction looking, kind of questionable, like what this intriguing character look like that, where the earlier Baumhofer was the classic hero look, so we're kind of redefining what that classic hero looks like, and society does that all the time. What does our hero look like now? Our heroes now look kind of dressed in black a lot, whereas they start out in color, but society kind of dictates that too.
You're really associated with the Phantom, and
speaking of Widow's Peak.
Speaking of Widow's Peak, and you've done it across many mediums, or even coins I've seen. So, do you have any new projects coming up with the Ghost Who Walks? Or?
I not currently. There's always something going on with the Phantom. But nothing has panned out at the moment. There's always something hanging out, and I'm kind of waiting on, an answer here and there. But I don't have anything lined up currently with the Phantom.
Why do you think you are so identified? I mean, you've got a rabbit
I've just been
fortunate.
No, I've just been fortunate to be associated with characters like the Phantom or any of the Edgar Rice Burroughs characters. It really wasn't my intention. I mean, my intention was never to be associated with a specific character. It's just I was painting something that I love doing. Maybe with the Phantom, with that character, I wanted to try to do a new take, or my take on his portrayal. So I was looking at a different facet, just like when we look at a gem, like there's different facets to look at to see a better side of it. And I was always kind of turning the facet around to see how else I can present that character. And plus it was the connection with the pulp and with the way I like to paint. And I'm a little bit more of a golden age type of, inspired illustrator. So that was definitely there. And, I was always just attracted towards more of the older, famous artists,
When we were talking, you were getting close to finishing this. You were talking about once that's out of the way, you can return to a kind of a passion project of your own. and you talked about that at Windy City when we were together there a few months ago. In that podcast I alluded to that came out about a week ago, you sort of describe what you have in mind as Pulpit Venture for all ages, with your own world and characters.
Yeah, my characters are based on the same pulp tropes that we currently know. The hero, kind of like a Doc Savage hero. I have like a detective that's a little bit more based on the shadow. But I want a little bit more of that detective feel in solving the crimes or the mysteries instead of just the muscle solving the problems. But I said all ages because I'd like to keep introducing people to what I like, and I like the pulp films, the classic Universal black and white films. I like the noir black and white films. I'm trying to see if some of those images showed up.
We've had good timing up to this point.
So I came up with a group called New Dreaming Men, and these are some of my thumbnails for Tarzan: Forest of Stone. This is actually kind of funny. This is my original sketch that was kind of approved, but they wanted to do some changes, and I was talking to the art director and Christopher, and that's, it was okay, and I was happy that they kind of went with that project, but there was a lot of problems, like the horse, it had the teeth stabbing him in the neck, so I had to flop the horse, but now Tarzan didn't look good, and they gave me the approval to go ahead on it, but liven up the character a little bit more, maybe make his arms come out a little bit more, maybe make his legs come out, make it. So I felt like, okay, so they like it, but yet they don't like it. We like what you did, but make it better now, which is what we normally do anyway when we put a pencil together for a client to take a look at. But I remember saying, I can't start this because I just don't believe that it's going to work out anymore. I mean, I look at what I drew and there's just something missing. So I remember not sleeping that night. I still remember this. And then in the morning I said, I have to redraw that whole figure. There's no way. There's a certain flow to the way the horse wasn't working now with that character. And the way I had originally designed it had a different flow to it. So, now that the flow had to change, that's when I said I got to put something else together, and that's when I came up with the new drawing of a new pose. And when I sent that off to Chris to take a look at, he's like, definitely, I'm glad you redid that because that's definitely a stronger pose, and it's going to make a much better cover. So,
veering briefly back to this project you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And I think some of those images are at the end of this, maybe. I'm guessing those are what those are.
Probably is. They're black and white images.
And I recognize one of them as a guy drinking coffee.
Yes.
And that's your photo on your Facebook page. So
you're
your own reference.
I use my own reference.
Yeah, nice. That's very meta.
Yeah.
So
there it is.
There we go. Now we're back on time.
So down there, it's got this little poem, a wink of an eye, sliced by time, and practice hands of the new dreaming men. So it's this group of dreamers who want to help inspire the world, and they're pulp characters. And we've got like this main guy who's not in my group anymore because that was a different way of looking. But that top one up there with
that was
the guy.
The coffee. That was
the
you.
Coffee shop.
That was you.
That was me. That's me and my mess and our last home before we bought it. So that's the beginning of the slides, then, right?
Yeah, and it cycles through. So we're
all right. So
past three here.
So originally I was going to do a graphic novel of New Dreaming Men, and I was going to paint it all in black and white, and then I didn't feel like it was going to be the proper way to present all of these characters. And plus, I didn't want to spend that much time getting this out. I wanted to get it out a lot quicker. So I felt the best way to do is to do it pulp style, have it written with black and white images on the inside. And then as I started working and realized we just can't have black and white images, we're gonna have to do full color paintings as well. So it's gonna be just that. It's gonna be a book where you read it like a pulp magazine, and it'll be like little spot illustrations where you're reading, and then the next page might have a full color painting, and the next page might have a black and white painting. And it's going to be everything from adventure to some fantasy to some sci-fi. It's going to have some like a Doc Savage kind of character and a guy in trench coat and fedora. It's going to be outer space, and it's going to all tie together. In my mind, I'm going, "Oh, it sounds ridiculous now."
Are you?
But it's fun too.
Well, that's what matters. Are you writing prose too?
Yeah.
Nice.
I've got a friend helping me out. So
yeah.
So that's something that I'm working on. I'm a little behind only because
People like me and.
Well, the important stuff, but it's not just you guys. It's me. I gotta work a little harder too. But it's something that I've actually been working on for quite a while. I've had some false starts. Years ago, I published a chapbook on New Dreaming Men with color cover and some black and white character shots with a short story written by a friend of mine, Aaron Chaps. And that was a wonderful story. I'll have to try to dig that out and share it with a lot of you guys. That just ended up not being the right timing for me, and I decided it wasn't really completely thought out the way it should be, and I was kind of like running too fast with it. So I spent a little bit more time on it in between other projects, so I was able to flesh out some of the characters. I can kind of go through some of this
sure,
too.
Go for it.
You know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Somebody asked me recently what was my favorite horror book to read, and it was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That was my favorite as a kid. It wasn't Frankenstein, it wasn't Dracula, it was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's Clifford Simak's City. Really early on when I started doing more pulp stuff, I was working with my friend Bob Garcia with his imprint, American Fantasy Press. So these are some of the covers I did for him, Stalking the Zombie for a Mike Resnick book. And I really had a great time with that cover because it was like this lumbering zombie monster towards a guy in a trench coat and a fedora, and this fantasy like Catwoman in the background with a movie theater in the background, and it's like everything I love, Another character that I was associated with years ago was Kolchak for Moonstone Books. Back then I was doing a lot of covers for a smaller publisher based in the Chicago area, and I got my work done so fast that he just kept throwing me covers, and the reason why I was getting so much work from them or getting them done fast is because they paid on delivery. So if I can do a cover a week or two covers a week, I was doing pretty well, and my wife was really happy. And the Philip Marlo one that came up earlier was one of my favorite paintings, not only because it's Philip Marlo and there's an action scene and he's firing a gun, but my cousin posed for that. So when I look at it, I see my cousin. It's kind of like a Robert Mitchum kind of a look to that, and got some. And there's my Phantom with guns, and then that was the one time King Features wrote back and said, "You can't have the Phantom firing his guns anymore on a cover." To Moonstone, they didn't want him firing his guns. And some of the Phantom work that Craig hinted at. So, so I'm using off photo reference for most of these at that time. That one was probably a little bit more drawn with less photos. It was actually a nice collaboration I did with a friend of mine. We were both art directing and working together. That was my Flash Gordon painting. So Flash Gordon was my favorite hero when I was a young boy, and my dad and I used to watch Flash Gordon Sunday mornings, and to see the wonky ships flying in the air with the sparklers on the back.
That was the one starring Steve Holland, right?
This is Buster Crabbe.
Oh, Buster Crabbe.
Yeah,
okay.
Buster Crabbe. But I met a guy that shared the same enthusiasm with the Buster Crabbe, Flash Gordon. But the way we were talking about it was as if those ships were really flying over our head, and the excitement was there, and those monsters were really scary, and the thrills were, and so when I came up with that, he's like, that's exactly the way I remember it as a kid. And it's like, it's nothing like what it was when we were a kid. So this just goes to show you what, film and books can do to inspire visuals and just the way we remember things. I wanted to make it look like George Lucas made it at the time. This is a project that I worked with an artist, a comic book artist, Alex Ross. I did some origins for Project Superpowers. That was probably my first action figure as a kid, Captain Action. And I did that for the Captain Action guys. There's my Batman painting. That's when somebody said, your Batman is the best Golden Age Batman I ever saw, and I didn't even realize a Golden Age Batman. Comic book covers for Image. A little bit more of a fedora guy. My spider painting.
Is that process the same across the board, or do you sort of tailor it depending on the personality or the sensibilities or the preferences of the...
It's definitely tailored. I mean, it's basically the same. The bottom line is probably the same, but based on who I'm working with, it does change. And you and I have worked together on a cover, and his covers up out there too, right, John?
Yeah, two of them.
Yeah,
Midnight Guardian, plug for John.
Yeah, but so like you and I will go back and forth on ideas, and what I like about working with you, you've got a very specific visual in mind, and I'm trying to get as close as I can to it, and then we end up coming up with something like, oh, that looks great, so we go with that, and like with Win has an idea what he wants on his cover, and then he'll say, this is what I'm looking for, and we kind of speak the same language as far as art. Like he said Maxfield Parrish, but like James Bama and Baumhofer or whatever, and then we'll have a phone conversation or a text conversation, and then he says, okay, go and draw, and then I present it to him. I present a bunch probably to everybody. I don't know if I do it to you as well. Thumbnails.
We do there was only one for this one, as I recall.
Oh, okay, well, I'll get to that one.
You just nailed it. But
I'll get to that one in a minute.
Yeah, okay. We got about 3 minutes before they kick us out. So go for it.
So I do my thumbnails, and then I present it to my editor or the publisher, and then from there they pick which one they like, and it might be a combination of one or two of them. I like this one, but I also like what's going on in there, so I'll do another drawing. And then once that's settled, then I do a bigger study, which you probably would have seen in the presentation where you saw the thumbnail and a pencil drawing, and then the painting. So once that's picked out, I do the drawing, we talk about colors, and then I do the painting. Now for this one here, that was a hard one. It's for me, it wasn't, not from you.
No,
because you said I want the Reaper on there and on Zana fighting the Reaper, and there's only okay, what do I do here? And do I go stylistically? Do I really show them fighting? And we kind of talk about movement in covers nowadays too. I'm trying to introduce a little bit more movement and action, and not just so posed, And we've done some posed ones. Mm-hmm. So for this one, I wanted a little bit more action. I couldn't get the right poses down for this piece at first. So I was going back and forth, and nothing was making me happy. But then all of a sudden, this one came up. And this was the only one that really hit me. And that's why maybe I just sent it to you, said, this is the one I think we should go with. And you said, I like it, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
So that just lucked out. It might have added, plus the fact that we were getting closer to the deadline, too.
That's kind of a creative thing that we all pretty much indulge.
But I know you would have said, no, I don't like that. It's not what I had in mind. But you saw it and said,
no. There were very few iterations on the others together, but this one rough, one pencil drawing.
Well, the nice thing about being here this weekend and having these books out, I get to see people's reactions from the first time they see the books, like with Secrets of the Nine or this, or even with the Deja Thoris cover. I get to see people's reaction now. The Burroughs said that book is they got one copy left of the Deja Thoris. It sold great this weekend for them. And I've been watching people's reaction to your books. And then, I'm right by Meteor House, so I get to see. And I'm right around the corner from John for Flinch Books.
And that's a perfect way to close this, because we've hit our time, and we're all going to be out there.
So if you have any more questions...
We're in Doc Savage Alley.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.